I'm a massive Jack Kirby fan. My first comics were the original Fantastic Four issues, at least in reprints. I was wondering if you remember your first run-in with Jack Kirby comics?
Interestingly enough, when I was a kid, considering the person I grew up to be, I loved war comics. Loved all that World War II stuff. And so before I ever got into Marvel proper, I was reading Sergeant Fury. I only read DC, but the one Marvel book I read was Sergeant Fury, and those early issues were all Kirby. But I didn't really, my little brain didn't say, oh, who is this guy that's drawing this book or anything. The other thing I remember about that is the first time I ever saw Captain America was when he was in a Sergeant Fury issue. But my first sort of awareness of Kirby, and again, I was young and it was a little too much for my brain to take in. There was something called Marvel Tales, and they reprinted the first issue of the Hulk and the first issue of Spider-Man and a couple of other first issues. And I remember I was a DC kid, and DC in the era was really clean and sculptured and pristine and kind of bland, And so I pick up this book, and I remember reading the Hulk story, where every character looked like he could be the Hulk. I remember there's a shot of Thunderbolt Ross and his mouth was open about this wide, I said, oh, he must be the Hulk, but no, it's this other guy. It was like, I remember reading that. And then I went back, and this is how long ago it was. I went back I grew up in Brooklyn, and you'd get your comics at like the local candy store, they called it. There'd be a soda fountain. You'd get an egg cream and a pretzel, go buy a comic book or a Spalding or a Pennsy Pinky or something. And I went back and I bought Avengers #1 that day. Came out around the same time and read that. But the Marvel, again, Kirby's art and the Marvel stuff was too weird for my little brain. So I had to put it away for a few years before I could come back to it. But that's my first memory of Kirby. When I was like in junior high school was when I call it my religious conversion to Marvel, and just, started devouring all of it and absolutely fell in love with Kirby. And Kirby is one of those creators that the more time passes, the more I realized just how incredibly brilliant that man was. The work just gets better as the years pass. Especially my favorite comics probably of all time are his Fourth World books at DC, New Gods and Forever People, Mr. Miracle, and even Jimmy Olsen. I love those books. And every time I revisit them, something opens up and deepens. He's just an extraordinary guy. And I always wonder, how did this Jewish kid from the Lower East Side, where did this stuff come from? Where did it come from? And yet he was just born with this extraordinary imagination and vision. Incredible.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what people were thinking when Kirby was putting out those books. You're talking about his imagination. We're in a world where we're used to sci-fi and blockbusters and these big ideas, but what were people thinking, picking up his books, even something like the Hulk, 12-cent pamphlets of newsprint? It's just
right. And when you look at when I look at 60s Marvel, the two books that really jump out at me in terms of that are Fantastic Four and Thor. And in the same era, month after month in both books, these concepts are just blowing out of his brain. Not to take any credit away from Stan, who did a brilliant job too, but a lot of those basic concepts we know came out of Kirby's head, because by that point he was basically plotting those books himself. You had the Inhumans and Galactus and the Silver Surfer and the Kree and the Negative Zone, and one thing after another there. And then in Thor, it was like the Greek gods and the High Evolutionary and Ego, the Living Planet, and the colonizers. It's like, it's just extraordinary what was coming out of this man. And
then you have the collages, of course.
Yes, the collages and his artwork just in general was taking you look at the early 60s Marvels and you look at the mid 60s Marvels, and it's almost like he's a different artist. What's interesting is if you look at his work in the 50s and his DC work before that, the work is actually better in some ways than his work at Marvel. And I don't know whether he wasn't getting inkers that were good enough to bring that out, or he was doing so much work because Marvel, I've heard it said that Marvel paid less. He had to do more work so that he couldn't put in the detail that he wanted. But by the mid 60s, the guy is just like not just one of the greatest comic book artists, one of the greatest artists we've ever seen anywhere, period, And yeah, so to me as a kid, it was extraordinary. It was just extraordinary. I always say it was like you opened up those books and you fell through a portal into another dimension. And that dimension is like the Twilight Zone, a dimension of sight and sound and mind, just incredible stuff.
Did you ever have any run-ins with Kirby? I know you've worked on a lot of his characters as well.
No, I never did. And that's really sad to me that I never did. When I first started at Marvel, a lot of the guys that I grew up reading, and in DC too, the Gene Colans, Don Hex, even Steve Ditko, guys like that were still around drawing for them. But by the time I started, Kirby was out of comics pretty much, aside from some of the creator-owned stuff that he did. And he was working in animation. And never met him. And I'm really sorry, because everything I ever hear about him was that he was also not just an incredible artist, but a really great guy too.
One of my favorite random books that you worked on, and we'll get to the new stuff, is an issue of Conan. I think it was 129 with Gil Kane. To have a Marvel published book where it has like Iranistan, and then you have Zoroaster show up, drawn by Gil Kane. It was one of those. I was going to ask, did you have any run-ins with Zoroastrianism, or did you have to look into it at all, or was it based on any of the Robert E. Howard stuff?
No, it wasn't. Wow, I'm going to have to, when we're done talking, go find these issues, because I don't remember this. But because of my own spiritual search and awareness of different spiritual paths, I was, familiar, perhaps not in the deepest way, but I was absolutely familiar with Zoroastrianism, And in fact, I have a spiritual master of many, many years since I was a teenager named Meher Baba. And although he includes all faiths, paths, and traditions, including no faiths, paths, and traditions, he was born Zoroastrian. So I know a bit about that through that window. Gil Kane came on. He came on right after Buscema left. And then we did like a one-parter, and then we had a big 4-part epic thing. And then I left, I think, after about 4 or 5 issues. So it must be that big multi-part story. I'll have to go check it out. But like I said, it was 1980 or 81 or something like that. So
right.
Hard for me to remember.
Do you have those moments where someone will bring up an issue and then you just say, well, I don't remember?
I've written a lot, and I've written it over like a 40+ year period. So sometimes, like I remember in general what those stories were in Conan, but I certainly don't remember every word or every phrase or every element that I brought into the stories. And what it brings up for me is, people that try to tell the definitive history of their lives. I'm a big Beatles fan. I always love this sort of Lennon said this and McCartney said this. And you have two guys, first of all, who lived through the 60s, where they were recording, touring, doing radio, making movies, doing all these things and taking massive amounts of drugs, Yes. And then, 40 years later, whatever it was, Lennon was 20 years later, and McCartney now it's like, 55 years later, sitting down and say, well, this is exactly how it happened. And I remember, no, you don't. Even if you think you do, you don't. So I always say when I try to answer these questions, to the best of my ability, this is how I remember it. I don't know if this is exactly how it was, but this is the way I remember it. And, someone else may come along and have a completely different view of things, and they might not be wrong. So, memory is a funny thing. I think I'm good at getting at the essence of the memory, not necessarily every detail. And I think it's the essence, the truth at the heart of the memory that's important, as opposed to, did this happen on Tuesday at 3:00 or the next month on a Thursday at 5:30? That part doesn't matter to me. What matters is the truth underneath that.
We were talking about the misspelling. Do people, when people say DeMatteis, do people still get it misspelled, or do you still have to go?
I don't see misspelling that much. That's so funny. I randomly opened that comic and my last name was misspelled, and the first time in 40 years I noticed that in that issue. Here's the thing. When my family came to America, the name got squashed, basically Americanized into DeMatteis.
Right.
And growing up, we said DeMatteis, but my father always said it's really DeMatteis. That's the way it's really pronounced, And at a certain point, I remember I told my daughter that. I said, well, if that's the way it is, then shouldn't that be the way we say it? And I went, you're right. And I just said, that's it from now on, So there are people that know me as DeMatteis. I accept that. I accept DeMatteis. I do not accept DeMatteis or any other of those weird pronunciations. Those are the only two that are approved with the DeMatteis family crest.
That's funny that you say where it's like there are people who knew you then. It was like that was another JM, and now this is me today, you know.
Right. Well, it's been DeMatteis for quite a while now, but yeah. But it's true. But it's like growing up, I had a friend. His name was Bob Izzo, but the real Italian pronunciation was Izzo.
Right.
But it got Americanized into Izzo. So do you call him Izzo? Do you call him Izzo? Things like that. The other funny thing is I went to Italy a few years ago for the first time. I went to Calabria, where my Italian grandparents came from. And I met a branch of the family there, and they pronounce it slightly differently. They pronounce it DeMatteis, like it's one long sound, whereas my father said DeMatteis with an S at the end. So there's DeMatteis, there's DeMatteis, and then all of a sudden there's DeMatteis. And I said, I'm not changing it again. It is what it is at this point.
We were talking about run-ins with Kirby. I don't know if Stan Lee was still responding to the letters pages personally at this point, but you had a letter in one of the Amazing Spider-Man. Again, this is one of those stories where it's like this was way back when. If it's
right.
like
I had a bunch of letters published back in those days. Yeah.
Right. I love when you go through the back issues. You go through these back issue bins, and then you're like, wait, this is like what is George R. R. Martin doing?
That's right. And I look back and I see this kid, this excited kid. I was maybe from 12 to 15, right? Actually, I was probably writing a letter. I had the last letter I probably ever had printed was when I was in my early 20s in an issue of Master of Kung Fu or something. But what I loved as a kid was this idea that whether it was true or not, and I think for the most part it was, I could write a letter. This is obviously pre-internet. And then maybe the guy that wrote this story will read my letter. I'll be able to reach out and directly connect with that guy. That was a very exciting thing. I don't know if Stan was reading or, having anything to do with the letters pages at that point, but a lot of the other writers were. And so that was a very exciting thing to be able to put your thoughts down and say what that story made you think or feel and write in that way. And then, the older I got, the more philosophical the letters got. I remember writing letters to Warlock and all these very when the original the Roy Thomas, Gil Kane, Warlock, and all the religious metaphors and all this stuff. And it was an interesting time. Now I don't know why anyone would write a letter to a comic for the most part, because you can connect with creators almost anywhere. That's one of the things I love about social media. There's a lot of downsides to social media, but for me, 90% of the time, it's been a very, very positive experience because people who read and appreciate my work reach out to me. We get to communicate and talk a little bit back and forth, and it's a nice thing. It's a really sweet thing. It's direct. There's nothing in between. It's a direct line. I really appreciate that and enjoy it.
You have your website as well, where you read your write-ups, you'll post something, then people can communicate with you.
Yeah,
there's some serious conversations in there too. There are people writing novels.
Right. Yeah. There's some people that are very, very that's their place to go. And actually, I would actually encourage people to do it through the website sometimes, because not as many people contact me through the website, which means it's going to jump out. When you've got 100 comments on Twitter, it's hard for the comment necessarily to jump out. Whereas if it's just a few people commenting on the website, then I can focus on it in a different way. But I appreciate it, whether it's Facebook and Twitter or my website. It's a great thing to be able to communicate that way.
One more nostalgia question, and then we're going to jump to the present. You're writing these letters, you're reading Warlock, reading Gil Kane as a fan, and then you get to work with Gil Kane. What were your interactions with him? Did you have any of those fanboy, like, hey, I read your comics, or did you keep it, professional?
I'm trying to think if I ever, because working with someone doesn't mean you ever meet them. Especially on a monthly book, it's like, here's the plot, here's the art, here's the script, blah, 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 you know what I mean? So I don't think I ever met Gil Kane, which is a shame, because growing up, even before I discovered Kirby, Gil Kane was the guy for me. I just loved, for some reason, even in the era when there weren't a lot of credits in comics, I always knew who Gil Kane was. Just loved his work. So although it was a shame that Sal Buscema left Conan when I was working on it, the fact that Gil Kane stepped into it was amazing. And for me in those early days, I had stories that were done by Gil Kane, Sal Buscema, Gene Colan, Don Heck, Steve Ditko. And I always think, God, I'd love to go back in time with the skill set that I have now and write stories for those guys. Because I was new. I was still learning, and I look back and I go, that could have been better, or this could have been better. But, I also have learned over the years to just honor my younger self. He was doing the best he could at the time with the skill set that he had, But the fact that looking back, more than even when it was happening, looking back and realizing I got to work with all these guys, it's incredible. I mean, Steve Ditko was drawing, stories for the DC anthology books, his little 8-page, horror and science fiction stories. Amazing. I worked with Gene Colan on a couple of black and white Hulk stories. I always loved Gene Colan's work. Amazing. Then, that I get to collaborate with someone like Sal Buscema, where we really got to know each other and collaborate. And he's another one whose work I always loved. Just, it doesn't get better than that.
It's a shame that you and Sal's Spectacular Spider-Man hasn't been collected. The Child Within, like, why wouldn't you want a book full of Sal Buscema art?
People ask me this constantly. It comes up on social media constantly. Why hasn't that run been collected? And my answer is, I haven't got a bloody clue. I have no idea. If I look at my superhero work, I've done worked in a lot of different genres, and a lot of different. Anyway, that's some of the very, very best work I've ever done, and certainly among with my Spider-Man work, that 2-year run is, for me, that's the best stuff I ever did. They collected an entire omnibus of that entire run in Poland about 2 years ago. They've collected The Child Within in Italy and South America. I mean, it's been collected all over the world. The files are done. Why is it not being collected here? I have no idea. Sometimes I see stuff of mine collected and I'm like, oh, dear God, why did they collect that? Couldn't it have just sailed off into obscurity and been forgotten, And then I have this work that I'm so proud of. And that, take me out of the equation. This is Sal at the top of his game on those books, so good. Why is this not out there? There's been a story. You can't even get all of them on Marvel Unlimited, in digital form. I don't think the entire run is even out there. There's random issues. I don't understand. People always say, so what can I do? And I just say, write a letter to Marvel. Just, if you really want to see it, and there's a lot of people out there that want to see it, then let Marvel know you want to see it. I certainly want to see it. Unlike everybody else, the solicits come out every month and I go online and I look, maybe this is the month. I'll say no. It's like next month. No. Oh, but they collected that. Oh, God,
Block it out of my memory.
Right.
You have a freelancing background. Times have changed. There are different avenues of freelancing. Now we have the internet. I was wondering if you have any advice or any guidelines for people freelancing, whether it's freelance writing.
Things have definitely changed since I started. When I started, it was all about writing letters, which I guess it can still be if you get the right email address. I was always a big believer in taking a chance and reaching out, to an editor, to a producer of a TV show, to whatever it was, and just writing a letter and writing it from my heart, and a lot of times the door doesn't open, but there's always going to be that one person who'll go, oh, let me see what this is about, and open that door. So I think that's really, really important. The other thing is, I always say this when I do my writing classes, you need a hard head and a fierce will. You need a fierce will because in order to survive as a freelancer, you just have to be unrelenting. I don't mean unrelenting in a negative sense. You don't want to be in people's faces and be an annoying pest, but you have to keep going and you have to not give up. You have to believe in yourself more than anyone else in the world is ever going to believe in you. And you have to have a hard head because rejection is just part of the game. I don't care how successful you are. I've had a long and fairly successful career in a lot of different media. I'm always dealing with rejection. Oh, I missed that project. It didn't go. Wait, we were going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. Oh, no, I had planned on doing these 3 projects for the next 3 months. What? They all fell through? Rejection is just part of the game. And you have to have a hard head, a thick skin to deal with that because it's very, very easy to take it personally. Because we're as writers, we're digging into the deepest parts of ourselves. We're putting it down in a document and we're sailing it out to the world. And when people reject that, it's like they're rejecting us in a very deep way, and you can't. So I always say, get rejected. I mean, it may be metaphorically or maybe literally. Crawl under your desk, bang your head against the wall. I've probably done that at some point in my career. Shake your fist, curse God, then come out from under your desk, sit down and write another story. Because I always say creativity is the best revenge. You got to keep creating.
That's a good tombstone line as well.
Creativity is the best revenge. It's maybe a little too negative for the tombstone. And I don't even mean revenge in it like I'm going to get you, and but in the sense of like, all right, you keep slamming the door in my face, I'm going to create something else, and this will get through the door. And that's the way it tends to work. And sometimes I've seen it over the years. I've had stories that I've worked on, and it's taken anywhere from 5 years to literally 25 years before those stories make it out into the world in some form. You work on it, you pitch it, the door slams, you put it away for a couple of years, you take it out, you rework it, you sail it out again, bam, the door gets closed, you put it away again. And each time you refine it, and then finally, one day it happens, and suddenly it's out there. I just, in December, I finished a novella, which will be out probably in June, called The Witness. And the idea started as a screenplay idea in 2002. Okay. Wrote a screenplay, worked with a big producer on this screenplay. We pitched it around. They couldn't sell it. We put it away for a few years. A few years go by. They came back to me. They said, oh, well, let's try to develop this as a TV pilot. We develop it as a TV pilot, goes out into the world, comes back. That just falls through. That producer goes away. I work on it. I revamp it. I revise it. I put it away. And then I had finished this one novella called The Excavator that just came out last June. If anyone wants to check it out, you can go to Amazon and get it. A piece of work I'm very proud of. And what am I going to do next? The publisher, we were talking about it. And I went, that idea that's 20 years old. And I finally got a chance to take it, expand it, deepen it, revise it. And it will finally be out in the world, not in the form that I originally expected, And that's the other thing I tell people in terms of the freelance life is you always have to be open to surprises. You always have to, the universe, you're going to be, I always say you're heading in this direction, straight ahead. You think, there's my goal, 3 miles that way. And then you're walking and you didn't see it before, but there's this like 700-foot wall. Well, I can't go that way. I guess I better go off to the right. You walk a mile to the right and there's this door, and you walk through the door into a place that you never expected, and it opens up some new vista in your career. You have to always be open to whatever comes along. Have your goals, but be open to those surprises, and don't say, no, I don't do that. I don't want to do that. I can't do that. Always be willing to challenge yourself. It's really, really important. And I always say, follow your dreams. They may not lead you where you expect to go, but they'll lead you someplace good. And sometimes the place that you didn't expect is better than the place that you thought you wanted to go. But you really need the right nervous system to do this, to be out in the trenches being a freelancer. I always say freelancing is like tap dancing on quicksand. You have to tap dance really fast so you don't sink. And you have to tap dance really well so all those people that hire you go, well, look at that guy dancing on the quicksand over there. He's pretty good. We should hire him to come dance for us, It's a wild life, and sometimes it's very harrowing. Sometimes it's just the greatest gig in the world. And overall, I have to say, if I look back over my career, it's the greatest gig in the world. There have been some hard times, but overall, it's been fantastic.
I'm glad you brought up the teaching as well. Are you still doing those Creation Point classes?
I have not done one since probably COVID year 1 or 2, and I really should. I do them with what I call regular irregularity. So it's been a couple of years, so it's probably about time for me to rework that, put that back out in the world. What I do regularly, though, for anyone that's interested, I have something called Creation Point Story Consultation, and that's where I work one-on-one with writers. So writers come to me, they give me a piece of work. I read it over, I make notes, we get on Skype, we talk about it, and I work with them. I've worked with people on comic book scripts, on screenplays, on prose, on anything, any piece of writing that you have. And I find it incredibly gratifying to work one-on-one with someone and help them to actually take this germ of an idea or this raw original manuscript and turn it into the thing that they want it to be. So if you go to my website, jmdmatteis.com, and go to the story consultation section, there's information there. And also when we finally get the classes back up and running, that information about that will be there as well.
You're doing your first Kickstarter, and it's not technically your first Kickstarter. You're doing multiple projects in one Kickstarter. So you have the DeMultiverse coming up.
Well, not coming up. The Kickstarter happened in November. Yeah.
Yes. How has that been? How has that experience been for you?
It's been an incredible experience. Absolutely exhausting. Never having done a Kickstarter before. It requires a hell of a lot of time and attention. For like 30 days, And my wife was like, when is this going to end? It's like, I'm never going to see you. You're always like here on your computer. But it was a great experience. Kind of going off what we were saying before, with ideas, you just keep stockpiling ideas and bringing them out into the world. I always have like tons of ideas floating around, things I'm working on, things I'm developing, usually alone, sometimes with an artist. And for a variety of reasons, maybe they don't fly or you just never get around to even pitching them. And so I was talking to a friend of mine. His name is David Baldy. He's a TV writer and producer. He actually took my first online Imagination 101 class at the beginning of the pandemic, somewhere early there. And we were talking, we became friends, we were talking, and he brought up Kickstarters and said, well, maybe we could do something together. And, so tell me about the ideas that you have. And I pitched him 4 ideas. And David was the one that said, let's do all of them. Meaning, let's do 4 first issues and make it an event. And then what we'll do when it's all done is that the people that support the Kickstarter get to vote on which of these 4 books they want to continue. And we'll do another Kickstarter to finish that one off and go from there and build a whole line of books that way. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. So, we went forward with 4 ideas. And by the end, because I'd been working on another project on the side, we actually threw in a 5th bonus book, toward the end. The 5th bonus book, though, was just a bonus. It's not included in the collector's edition. And it was just a great experience. I got to work with great artists, Matthew Dow Smith and Tom Mandrake and Sean McManus and David Baldion and Vasilis Godzilis. I mean, just great artists. The letterers, the colorists, everybody involved with like top-notch talent. David worked his fingers to the bone on this, and I worked really, really hard. And we just finished proofing all the books. They're off to the printer. We're going to get the first printed copies to check them out. And so everybody should have their books by, I think, probably late March, early April, something like that. And it's just very, very exciting to get that many ideas out into the world simultaneously. And some of them, like the one that Sean McManus and I did called Layla in the Lands of After. Sean and I have been talking about this, doing this together for about 15 years. Matt and I were working on God Said Matt Smith during the pandemic. We're putting that together, just doing it for ourselves. All these ideas, the Western that Tom Mandrake did, Wisdom, that's one that goes back at least 15 years I've been working on and revising and revamping. And the newest one, Any Man, which is actually new, and also the original idea goes back at least 12 years. It formed itself into the bigger idea that you see in the book more recently. But it's just been a thrill. It's been great. So, and the good news is, anyone that missed the Kickstarter can go to spellboundcomics.com and purchase any of the individual issues or purchase the collected edition. The collected edition is going to be very cool because it's got a foreword by Tom DeFalco. I wrote introductions to each of the stories. There's development art. There's script pages. It's a really, really nice package. And then, of course, on the individual issues, we have wonderful alternate covers by guys like Kevin McGuire and J.H. Williams III and Kent Williams and on and on. So check out the Spellbound Comics website, and there's still time for you to order these books and get them in the spring.
I'm glad you mentioned all of the production, because that's just the fun part. People, if you go and buy comics every Wednesday, you don't realize how much effort it takes to do just one comic.
Yeah.
The paper quality, sometimes there's a print error, all of that stuff where it's like it's expensive, time consuming, but when you get the box and everything is in working condition, it's a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah. And for me, again, with these ideas that I've lived with for so long, when David sent me recently the final proofs to look over, I'm like, oh, wait, this is real. We didn't just do this Kickstarter and then forgot about it. This is a real thing. It's happening. It's sort of like when you have kids, and your wife gets pregnant and you go through this whole pregnancy thing. And that's like an event in itself, just the pregnancy. And then suddenly you have a kid. And you're so into the pregnancy that you forget there's actually a kid that you're going to end up with at the end of it. And this is very similar. The whole Kickstarter and the creative work, because that's like this giant pregnancy going on. And suddenly we're going to have these children that we can hold in our hands and share with the world. So it's a great thing. I'm very, very proud of these books and very excited for people to see them.
That's it. That's Kickstarter from now on. It's like a giant pregnancy. It's like
that's right. Well, as you know, if you watch Kickstarter, sometimes people get pregnant and they never deliver the child, right?
Yeah, I get emails from like things that I backed like 3 years ago. It's like, oh wait, this is still a thing,
Right. And that's one of the things I'm really proud of is that most of the books were at least 3/4 of the way done before we even started the Kickstarter. We we were working on these things. And so no one's getting stiffed. It's all done. It's all ready. It's all going to the printers and it's coming your way. And I look forward. And the other thing is, so we will do this vote and we'll kickstart one of these books probably in the fall. But then I have 3 others that if we want, we can just take to other publishers and get going that way. So there's whatever avenues seem open to us because I want to see all 4 of these books, actually the 5th one as well, all of them continue. So it's very exciting, like I said, to get 5 new ideas out in the world simultaneously. It's really great. It's been a great creative year for me because I got the Kickstarter, been working on these novellas. I've been doing this work for Marvel. It's just been a lot of good stuff happening.
Right. And you mentioned David Baldy on earlier, and
yeah,
you two were working on the Ben Reilly Spider-Man book as well. So it's like, it's nice to see you find someone that you work well with and it's like, hey, let's do something else. And not only is it your own thing, you just get to put it out. It's like a creator owned.
And it's always great to discover somebody new. I mean, I know all the guys that I've worked with over the years whose work I love, and we get along really well creatively. But David was new to me before we started Ben Reilly, and I just fell in love with his work. So when we started talking about Any Man, it was like, let's ask David. And it's also funny working with David Baldy, who does Spellbound books, and then there's David Baldion, who's drawing the book. And in fact, they connected on social media before all this because of the similarities in their names, which I found very funny.
You're doing the Spider-Man books, Ben Reilly, Spider-Man, and Lost Hunt, not to be mistaken for Kraven's Last Hunt. But
right.
Do you feel more comfortable working on limited series as opposed to an ongoing? Like you've been there, done the ongoing series.
Yeah.
Does it give you any freedom?
Does it give you freedom? There's benefits to both, really. When you're doing a limited series, you have a story with a definitive beginning, middle, and end. You go in there and you tell your story and you're out. The beauty of an ongoing series is that you just get to really let it go and we were talking about the Spectacular Spider-Man run. That basically evolved over 2 years. To let a story grow and evolve over 2 years, especially the Harry Peter thread. That's it's like maybe a 5-issue series is a novella, and 2 years on a book is like writing the Brothers Karamazov. You know what I mean? It's like a big thing. So both those things, they're all fun in their way. And that's what I find. Story is story, and the avenue that we find to express it, whether we're doing it through a monthly book, a miniseries, we're writing a novel or a novella or a TV script or a movie script, whatever it may be, the story finds its avenue. But, story is story. It's just, it is nice though, because the one thing about ongoing stuff is things tend to not end so cleanly. With a miniseries, you can end things cleanly. Every once in a while, I get to be on an ongoing series and end things cleanly. Years ago, I did Ghost Rider with Bob Budiansky, and they told us the book was going to be canceled, but they gave us enough time ahead of time, that we were actually able to write an ending to the series. Now, obviously, someone came along and undid that eventually because that's comics. But we got to tell a complete story that ended. When I was writing Dr. Fate at DC, I decided when I was leaving the book, we had completely revamped the book, and I discussed with the editor and the next writer that they were going to go in their own different direction, and our story would actually come to a conclusion. And that's a great thing, because the whole idea behind most of these characters is they have to go on forever. You can't end their story. You can't wrap it up and say, and they lived happily ever after, because the next month someone's going to come along and blow them up all over again. So those rare occasions when you get to actually really finish a story are really amazing, really amazing.
We were talking about the Harry Osborn, Peter Parker relationship, and you read Child Within, and it's a lot of diving into the psyche. It's not just aesthetics. It's like, look at this guy in a costume beating up this guy in a costume. Although there is that, it's a lot of nightmare sequences and trauma, and you see that a lot in the newer stuff as well. Like reading Ben Reilly or reading Lost Hunt are kind of taking these famous characters that are on like t-shirts and merchandise and everything. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows Spider-Man, but it's like diving into their psychological profile. And I was wondering how you go about, after writing all of these characters, how do you go dive into their heads and say what makes this person tick?
Right. And that's the challenge. That's what makes it interesting to me. If it was just a couple of guys, I have to stop him robbing the bank, so we have to go punch each other for a while, and frankly, you'd be hard pressed to find a superhero comic that's that simple. You'd have to go back a really, 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 really long time to find that. But for me, it's always been about writing from the characters out. It's not about the plot structure. I like the idea that the plot forms around the inner workings of the characters. Sometimes you have a great plot idea that's like it's just pure plot, but even then, what does this mean for our characters? What are they going to go through? I always say when I talk to my classes, you got to, I always like you're a surgeon. You sort of saw off the top of the character's head. You have that little, they have the little light on their head there, and they look in and they poke around to find some corner of that psyche that hasn't been explored before. If it has been explored, you can go deeper with. A lot of the things with these characters, because of the nature of the business, and it is a business, and these guys are out there being licensed left and right in a million different ways. On one level, you're in a cage, so you can't go out. You can't push too far this way. But I say you can always go deeper. You can always dig down. You have to stay true to the essence of that character, but what can you tell us in some way that we didn't know before? What light can we shine on some aspect of their life, of their psychology, of their emotions that will, and also you need that for the readers. You got to put a hook in their heart and take them along. I've never been a fan of, say, the kind of detective stories that are pure plot. And you're just, they can be a lot of fun. They're like puzzles. And you want to see, how does this lead to this? Oh, that was a surprise. But even then, if you don't have interesting characters to take you on that journey, all the clever plotting in the world means nothing. So it's all about the characters in the end. And that's how I am as a reader. I want to be hooked in. I want to feel. I want to think, and that's the way I write. It's also the flip side of that in terms of hooking the audience is you have to, as a writer, and I always say this is metaphorical. Don't try this at home. You have to take a knife and plunge it into your chest, and you got to bleed onto the pages. You have to be shameless. You have to be honest. You have to put things into your stories that maybe you wouldn't tell your best friend. Now, they're going to be masked literally in some cases because they're coming out through these characters. So maybe that people don't realize how much of myself I'm revealing through this story. And sometimes I don't realize it till 10 years later when I read a story and I go, holy crap, that's about my relationship with my father. And I didn't realize I was writing that at the time, or whatever it may be. I wrote this novella called The Excavator that came out last June. And, when you're in the story, you're in the story. And when it was all done and I read it completed, I was like, oh, this is so incredibly biographical in every way. Now, the reader, I don't mean literally biographical, like events don't coincide with events, but it is psychologically and emotionally biographical. And that's what you hope for. It doesn't matter, you can write something that's autobiographical about an alien living on another planet. It still has the psychological and emotional reality that comes out of your psyche and your heart.
It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, talking about memories. It's like the feeling of a memory as opposed to this is what happened, like you said, at Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Yes. And that's exactly right. That's great because so it's the same thing I was saying. It's not about the detail. It's about the core of it. So maybe you're writing a story that's a science fiction story on another planet. That's that outer detail level. But you want the emotional core to be absolutely real. And people sense that. People ask me, why do you think Kraven's Last Hunt has lasted so long? And why did it resonate? I think one of the reasons for me, aside from like the brilliant art and storytelling of Mike Zeck, is that when I was writing that story, I was going through a very personal hell. It was not a fun time in my life. And it wasn't conscious, but all my pain, all my struggle was coming out in that story through those characters. I was Peter, buried alive, reaching for love. I was the part of my psyche that's Vermin down in the sewers, the part that feels like Kraven, going slightly mad, all those things, not conscious at all, but it was all going into that. And you can look at it afterwards and go, oh yeah, I didn't realize that. So I think that psychological and emotional authenticity is really, really important, and it elevates the work. But I also say, even when someone doesn't think they're doing it, they're doing it. My joke is always, I pick what I think of as like, the epitome of escapist entertainment, something like Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars stories, which I loved as a teenager. I'm sure that people that knew Edgar Rice Burroughs, they'd read those books and go, that's Edgar. Oh my God, I can't believe he put that in the story. That happened to him last week. Didn't you know what I mean? It's like, it seems like total escapism, but I'm sure it all becomes a Rorschach test about who we are.
A lot of these stories are about identity and belonging, and you have Ben Reilly, whose theme is he's a clone of Peter Parker, but he wants to be his own, and that's a very human trait, to want to be your own person. You have even petty moments where it's like you like something and it feels like it's yours, and then someone else likes something and you're like, nah, but this is my thing. So
Yeah, I've had that experience. Yeah.
right, it's just one of those things where you're talking about you're going through something while writing Kraven's Last Hunt, putting yourself into Spider-Man Lost Hunt, again, not to be mistaken with Kraven's Last Hunt. Do you have to go back and put yourself in that mind state, or as corny as this sounds, do the characters kind of speak for
They no,
themselves?
it's not corny because it's the truth. It's, when I did the Ben Reilly thing, and I've said this a bunch of times, it's like, characters like Ben Reilly and Peter Parker, I spent so much time with them that they become real to me. I don't think of Peter Parker as some fictional character. He's like some guy I know. And so doing the Ben Reilly book, it's like, you haven't seen a friend of yours in 15 years and you bump into him on the street and let's go get something to eat. And you sit down and you start having a conversation. It's like, no time has passed. That's what it is with those characters. And that's what it was with Ben. It's the same thing with this Lost Hunt book. It's Peter and Mary Jane. They're in Portland during the same period that the Ben Reilly stuff is taking place. Well, I know those two characters. I know that marriage, at least my version of it, we all bring our versions of these characters. It becomes very, very personal. We sort of project ourselves into these pre-existing characters and leave pieces of ourselves in them, which other people then come and build on the pieces of us that we've left in these characters, just as I'm building on what's come before me, But it becomes a very, very sort of intimate fusion of writer and character. So my Peter is not Tom DeFalco's Peter, is not, Roger Stern's Peter or Dan Slott's Peter, They're all a little different because we're putting our own psychological and emotional selves into these characters. But it was like, oh, Peter and Mary Jane, how really great to see you again. Boy, you guys are in a rough spot. Huh? Let's write about that and let's see what's going on here. And, the Kraven aspect of the story, one of the great things was it gave me an opportunity, and I don't want to give anything away because why spoil it? But there's a new character that gets introduced that had been floating around in the back of my head for a few years because there's a whole chunk of Kraven's story that I felt was missing, which is how did this guy, he's from a family of exiled Russian aristocrats who come to New York because they're thrown out during the Russian Revolution. His mother, kills herself in a mental institution. His father's a broken man. How did this guy end up being the guy in Africa and the pedal pushers, chasing elephants around and hunting Spider-Man? There's something missing in the middle there, And I started, and this was not with any story in mind. No one had said to me, "Do you want to do this?" It's just I got in a discussion with somebody about Kraven and about certain elements. Certain elements, have not dated well either. The Great White Hunter thing is really sort of doesn't play these days, Whereas in those days, you just thought about it was just like it was a trope and you used it and that's that. So this new character kind of explains a whole hidden history of Kraven, and I think when you're done, you will see him in a new light. And also, we introduce a character that I really, really love and hope to revisit again in the future, and then other writers will come along and revisit her as well.
When you're promoting these books, you've worked on them. You want people to pick up the book and read it cover to cover. In this world where comics compete with movies and video games and different types of media, how do you know how much to promote and how much to just say go buy the book?
It's a great question. I remember a few years back, Keith Giffen and I were working on something, and he did an interview, and he gave some big thing away, And I said, Keith, you told him whatever. He said, look, with the way the marketplace is right now, the way everything is now, so you give away a chunk of something, it'll get people interested. They'll come in and they'll read the story, and I think there's some truth to that. I think there's a balance between how much do you tell. And it used to be like, don't tell them anything. But I think it's, there's so much competition for so much media, as you said, that I think you have to give people a little bit more to get them hooked. It's sort of like over the years as movie trailers have evolved, whereas movie trailers used to be, you didn't really know what the story was. You got a general sense of it. And then all of a sudden movie trailers morphed into this thing where you could see the trailer and never have to go see the movie because they've just told you everything in the trailer. And somewhere between those 2 points of view, I think is it. I have no problem discussing anything from those first 3 issues. I'm obviously not going to tell you what's going to happen after that. But, I was just talking to my wife this morning about the fact of I've been doing this a long time, but I just keep doing it because it's who I am. I always have a story to tell about something, about somebody, and it keeps you sharp and focused. Stories to create a story, when I think about it sometimes, is kind of an insane thing when you think about it, because you're getting lost in something that doesn't exist. right? And you're making up people that don't exist, and you're getting involved in their psychology and their emotions, and you're getting involved in the mechanics of the plot. And that could be the definition of insanity, really. If you never published anything, you just spent all your time doing that, someone could say, he's crazy, he's living in a fantasy world. And yet, it's the greatest form of therapy. It's the greatest form of creative expression. And then you get to sail it out into the world and share it with people, and they respond to it and interact with you. It's a phenomenal thing, but it's kind of crazy. But I'm not equipped to do anything else. I've always been a very creative person, whether it was my writing. When I was a kid, I was very into art. I've done a lot of music. Those are the things that have always called me. I am not equipped for the so-called real world out there at all. I don't like it. I don't want to be a part of it.
No 9 to 5, please.
No, no. The few times I attempted anything like that, it was a dismal failure.
Yeah.
As people that know me can attest.
Are you still doing the music?
I still do. I go through phases where I go during when the beginning of the pandemic. I'm always writing. I got new songs. And what I decided to do, because I've stockpiling so many songs. So over the first year or so of the pandemic, I just started making demos. So just on my phone, with a little recording thing on my phone, and recording 20, 30 demos of different songs. And my hope is, I keep saying this, and I got to do it before too much time passes, and a lot of time has passed already. I want to get together with some musician friends and go into the studio and do at least a double album's worth of material, because I have so many songs and so much material that I want to record, because music is very important to me. Music is very important. It's a huge, huge part of my life. I love to sing. I love to write. I guess, in writing songs and singing. And then the actual, it's funny, I don't think of myself as a particularly skilled musician. I mean, I'm good. I played in bands. I'm a really good rhythm guitar player and all that, but I basically, I play the piano, but I would never call myself a piano player. I use the piano to write songs. My guitar, first and foremost, is a communication device that helps me write songs. And then, the fun of just playing is a whole other thing besides that. So it's the songwriting and the singing first, and then the instruments as an avenue to get those songs out into the world. But, I started playing and writing when I was a teenager. I actually started playing when I was in 6th grade, I think, when I first took guitar lessons. Started writing when I was about 15. So it's just a part of myself that's really, really important. And I've often said, and it's a hard thing to explain, that even as a writer of stories, there's something I write as a musician. There's a musical flow that I intuitively hook into in the creative act. Once a musician, always a musician, and I think it informs everything that you do in some way.
And you were mentioning making music with other musicians, and like comics, if you're working with other people, it is a collaborative medium as well. So everyone brings their own.
And it may be my song, and I may have the arrangement in my head a certain way, and then someone says, what about if we do this? I was like, oh, do that, and it's very exciting. And that give and take. That's why, I'm glad that I'm not one of those guys who has the skills to sit down in a studio and play every instrument himself, because you lose so much. You want that interaction, that give and take. Just what I talked about before about being open to surprises. In the creative act, you have to be open to surprises, whether it's a surprise from your own unconscious, which happens very often when I'm working. I'm writing a story and the character says or does something that I didn't expect. How did that happen? I didn't plan that, Or if you're working with other people, whether it's, another writer or the artist or another musician, and they do something that you didn't expect, and it's the thing that lifts up the whole work. It's a great thing. Collaboration is a wonderful thing.
I was wondering if there's anything that you think we haven't covered, or anything that you think we missed, or anything you just want to throw out there.
No, I think we kind of hit all the big things of the moment anyway. There's 40 years of other stuff we could talk about, but in terms of what's happening now, and then your other questions, I think we're good. And is there anything else before we go that you want to ask that you didn't get a chance to ask?
I think one thing that we talked about on Twitter, which is I can just go and read that tweet and just get the answer for it. But it was
what question was that?
With Neal Adams in what was it, Soho Weekly News? I think it was 1979. He did a cover for a piece that you did.
Yes, back in my journalism days. Yeah,
right. I was wondering just, how that interview happened. And for those who don't know, it was about unionizing comic book creators. Right, so it was Neal Adams being Neal Adams, pretty much. Right.
Well, I had done several articles for different papers. I was doing journalism. I was doing rock and roll journalism. I was just getting my foot in the door in comics, and sort of combining them all by by doing some articles about the comic book business and interviewing folks at Marvel and DC. And I pitched the Soho Weekly News on a story. And I guess I'm trying to remember if I had done the interview with Neal Adams already. I might have. And how did I get the interview? He didn't know me. I just, wrote him a letter and said, or called him up and said, hey, I'm doing this article. Can I interview you? And he said, fine. But the Soho Weekly News hooked on to the unionization part of it. The conditions for people working in comics, the need for, and you can see all these years later how well it all turned out, because there is no such thing as a union for comic book creators, which is, really enlightening when I started working in TV and both in live action animation, and you see what the hell a union can do for you, incredible things that a union can do for you. And it's really, it's one of the great crimes that we're in comics. Everyone's just out there in their foxholes, ducking bullets, doing the best they can. When that became the focus of the article, I think they approached Neal about doing the cover, which he did. And it's one of those things that's folded up and stuffed in a drawer since 1979. And then when he passed away, I remember, oh, wow, I did that interview and I have this cover. So I took a picture of it and put it out online. There was an interesting guy and an incredible talent, huh? Amazing, really amazing.
Definitely. That's a great cover too. Like it just screams Neal Adams as well. It's like, of course he did this.
The guy's like chained to his desk in the foreground while the shadowy figure is yelling, more pages, more pages.